Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 5, Episode number 4. Today is Sunday, January 7th, 2018. My name is Graham Perro, and with me, as always, are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. We've got a couple of games to talk about this week. No big news in terms of trades or stuff like that, so I guess we can get right into the games. And we will talk about what was awesome and what was not awesome. Okay, game number 1, Saskatchewan over Georgia, 13-9. Game number 2, which was Buffalo, 13-8 over Calgary, almost the same score. I didn't realize that till now. And the third game was not the same score by any stretch. That was Toronto over Vancouver, 24-7. And I have a couple of guesses for Tyler's not awesomes this week. I've got a tickle in my throat, so I'm going to let somebody else start. Tyler, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My first awesome, I am going to pick watching Callum Crawford in Buffalo, and specifically his twister shots. I said it last year in one of the episodes. When you watch him, he doesn't just kind of like come across his face and shoot. He comes completely across and gets a shot up and places it around the goalie while he's jumping through the air. This week he did it in the same direction he was jumping, so like I'm jump this way and reach around you. Last year a lot he would come this way and then reach behind him and put it in. I don't see anybody else even doing this, and it is incredible to watch a guy shoot like that and shoot well. And I say that's pretty awesome. Listen, do you have an awesome?
My first awesome was on the same player, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with it because I really like watching Callum Crawford. He was one of those players when the Mammoth acquired him. I was like, awesome! This is cool. I like cheering him on. And so he was also one of those things that, as we talked about last week, that changed with the Mammoth that I went, I don't know how I feel about this. So I still like watching him play, even if he's not for my team. So he definitely was awesome this weekend. He had several goals. He's just fun to watch. He's a good offensive player. So I'm disappointed it's not in a Mammoth uniform anymore, but the fact that I can still watch him play makes me happy. So back to you, Graham.
All right. I'm going to switch gears and go over to the Rock. I had to wear my Rock jersey tonight.
Your mic is totally different than it was a moment ago.
Yes. Oh, I moved
It's very soft.
That's better. Yeah, I moved it out of the way so I could cough. So I'm going to go with the Rock, and the Rock was just awesome on Saturday night. Obviously, the offense was great in scoring all those goals, but transition had a really good game as well. The defense and goaltending were solid. Only one goal in the first 41 or something minutes of the game. Riley Hutchcraft came in and played, I think it was 6 or 6.5 minutes or something, and didn't allow a goal at all. So on only 4 shots, he has the highest save percentage in NLL history at 100%. That will probably drop at some point, but maybe he'll just retire now and keep that record. But in any case, Schreiber, Hellier, and Adam Jones each had 10 points or 10 plus points. And I'm quite sure that has happened in the past, having 3 teammates having 10 plus points in the same game.
We had it last year with Georgia.
That's not unlikely. Yeah, I believe that. I was going to look that up today to see if there was an NLL fact of the day in the making there. And there might be something, but that particular one I don't think is one. But in any case, just a great game all around by the Rock. And so that's my first awesome. Tyler, what's up?
I will stick with that area slightly. Meant to show it last week, but yeah. Your player, Tom Schreiber, U.S. Lacrosse this month. Is he the best player in the world right now? And I say yeah. 2-time defending MLL MVP, NLL Rookie of the Year. I can't see anybody producing at the same level as him. There's some great players, but who are willing to commit to both leagues and produce at that level and get that recognition. It's him. Brian Shanahan, he was on Stealth Classified last week, Friday night show, and he said no. Like he said, oh, that's like the top right now about Schreiber, and he says he's not, but he didn't say who is better. And I would love to hear that answer. Because who's going out, committing to both leagues, and playing at the highest level and producing in both leagues? He's the guy. So congrats to Tom Schreiber on currently being the best player in the world right now. Melissa, you're next.
All right, so I'm gonna change speeds just a little bit. I think my next awesome is going to be about the goaltending in the Storm Rush game. The 13-9 score doesn't fully show what happened. That was definitely a fourth quarter pull away, and up until that point, both goalies were just making some amazing stops. But to also counter that, the offenses weren't necessarily playing to their best. So there was some of that, but the goalies were looking pretty good in net. So that was a good battle of the goalies. So I always like those. What about you, Graham?
All right, my next one, I'm going to stick with the Rock stealth game from Saturday night. And I'm going to send props to the broadcasters, Jake Elliott and Brad Schauner. Both of them obviously working for the Vancouver Stealth. And it's got to be difficult. It's difficult enough for Stealth fans to watch their team getting completely blown out. But it's got to be at least as difficult to broadcast such a game. But they handled it like pros. They did a great job. They were trying to be positive, but they weren't unrealistic. Jake Elliott said at one point when the Stealth had scored 3 or 4 in a row, it's like, oh, the comeback begins. And, right away said, obviously I'm kidding because, the comeback is rather unlikely at this point. But they tried to be positive, but and pointed out where the Stealth, were having problems. But they didn't drop into, oh, I can't believe this. This is the worst game ever. I can't believe this. These guys are getting paid for all of this. And they didn't drop into that. So that was good to see, and I thought they did a pretty good job, despite what must have been a pretty difficult game to watch. So, Tyler, you're next.
Sure. My next awesome is... Boy, I don't know. It's not directly related to the games, but he does occasionally comment on the games. But lately, Eric Martin, former stealth defender, and he has been just on fire on Twitter, putting up comments like holding leagues accountable. He will go after the MLL, questioning like their choices around broadcast rights and what are they doing with the money and treating the players better. He go after the NLL and keep people in check as well, in the sense that it's not always this sunshine and rainbows. Like there occasionally is like sore spots that do exist, and he won't ignore them. He will also post political things. So if that's not your style, you don't want to care about that. You may not want to follow him, but it's at emart, EMART 55 on Twitter. If you're a newer fan of the league, you missed him. He retired a few years ago, but he's still has friends in the league and has opinions about what's happening and knows what's happening. So it's very good follow if you want. So go follow Eric Martin on Twitter as my awesome with the stuff he's been tweeting lately. You got any more awesomes, Melissa?
I do. I'm actually going to take it back to what Graham was talking about with the Toronto-Vancouver game. A little bit of what he was saying with the broadcast. Yeah, having a few years ago, I think it's been about 5 years now, the Mammoth went, I think they only won 4 games, something like that. And that was at the time I was writing for Pro Sports Colorado. And while I enjoyed it, that was the second season in a row that we'd had a really rough year. And it was really tough, to say the least, to try and keep in remotely positive and not just be like, especially since I'm just a fan writing and not be that fan going, this sucks. And not basically just be very negative. And so there was definitely a lot of props to that crew, because that is not easy to do, to find those glimmers of positive when a game is so one-sided. So definitely props to them. But my awesome actually is for the fans. I was very amazed at how many fans were still in the stadium at the end of that game. And for a Mammoth fan, I have been at games, and of course, for those who don't know, the Mammoth have one of the best attendance records in the league, and at one point, they were the best. So at that time, when they were at their peak, I was at games where 2/3 of the crowd left when the Mammoth weren't getting beaten as bad as the Stealth were. And so the fact that there were so many fans still left at the end of that, and there's no doubt about it, as we'll probably talk about in the Not Awesomes, the Stealth were completely dominated the entire game. And as I think Jake said, it's great that the Stealth showed up at 9:00 at night when the game started at 7, but for that many fans to still be there at the end of the game, I think was really huge, because as I said, I've been at Mammoth games where more of the crowd dispersed when the gap wasn't even as big as that. So props to Stealth fans. That is really awesome, and I know how hard that is to sit and watch your team just get decimated like that. So props to you guys. What about you, Graham?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that we've taken Stealth fans to task in the past for not showing up. And I guess it's not the Stealth fans themselves, but the fact that they get such low attendance in Vancouver, and then to show up to a game like that where your team's getting destroyed and hang around, like you said, I was impressed with the number of people in the stands by the end of the game. My next one is going back east to Alex Buque. After a couple of tough starts where he was pulled, he rebounded. He played really well against Calgary. Did not get pulled, so that's a good thing for the Bandits, definitely. And it was also nice to get that at home, to show the home team that or the home fans, I had a couple of rough starts, but I can get this done. And because I'm sure after the second and third game, the fans were like, I don't know if this Buque guy was really the guy we should have gone for. But to have him sort of rebound and say, okay, yeah, I had a couple of crappy starts, but that isn't me. This is me. And so, yeah, props to Buque for pulling it back together again. Tyler.
I am all out of awesomes for the week. Melissa, any more for you?
Nope, I just got a list of not awesomes. Do you have any more, Graham?
I got a couple I'll go over really quickly. The next awesome would be the Saskatchewan Rush. I guess we basically talked about it last week, how they're looking really dominant this year. Well, kind of like they have over the past 3 or 4 years, but they look a lot more like the championship team from a couple of years ago. I mean, they were very strong last year, but it was 2014 when they started the season 14-0, back when they were in Edmonton, and they just looked completely unstoppable. And that's kind of what they look like now. And I'm not going to say they're going to go 14-0, but there were people joking on Twitter and sort of semi-joking that this team could seriously go 18-0. Now, a lot of things would have to go right for that to happen. But if any team in the league can do it this year, it's going to be the Rush. And again, I'm not saying they will, and it's very unlikely they will. But the fact that we're even mentioning the possibility shows you what kind of a strong team they are. And my last awesome is also a quick one. I just want to mention Mitch Belisle as the new color guy for the Swarm. I don't know if this is a permanent job, but he's done the last couple of games. And I thought he's done a fantastic job. He clearly knows the game, having played it for many years. And Teddy Jenner mentioned it on his podcast as well, saying that former players, and how maybe this is kind of self-serving since Jenner himself is a former player, but former players do have great insight into the game, into how it's played, into obviously not just the rules, but the what happens on the bench, what happens on the floor, all of that stuff. So I thought Belisle did a great job. He seemed comfortable on the microphone and everything. So so props to Mitch Belisle for what might be his second or third career, I guess, if lacrosse is one of them. And I don't know what he does off the floor, but he did a good job. Not awesomes. Tyler, I guess I'll let you start.
Sure. I'll piggyback on that. That exact game, and the week before I'd heard Belial and I agree he was doing great. But this week I didn't hear Belial because the first half the audio was so bad that I was like, oh, thank goodness, there's another game on. I had to switch and never looked back. I'm hoping they fixed it. I couldn't take it. It was unpleasant, and I don't know if they even aware of that themselves, or what. But please, listen to your own feed, NLL. Hear the problem, relay the message, fix the problem as soon as possible. So I'm glad Mitch did a good job again. I couldn't hear it, and I didn't want to hear it the way it was. So I moved on. Melissa, how about you?
So apparently Tyler and I are on the same page tonight, because my first not awesome was the echo chamber that was the audio for the Swarm Rush game the first half. So as Tyler said, it was really hard to sit through. And I think if I would have been focusing 100% on the game, I probably would have turned it off too. Because it started out okay, but very quickly it went to this echoey, just badness. Although I do have to say, the ads were not 3 times louder. So there was that. But yeah, there was that weird echoey. And the second half was good. And so I enjoyed the second half much more. But yeah, that first half was just really bad. And I don't know if it was that way live or if it was just on the replay. Sounds like it might have been live too. So that's my first not awesome. What about you, Graham? What do you have?
I did not see the first half of the Swarm game, but I do remember reading some tweets from other people talking about how the sound was really bad. The sound in the second half that I saw was fine. So whatever problem they had, they did fix it. But again, like we talked about last week, it's great when they have one of these problems and fix it quickly before the game's over rather than just let it go for the whole game. But the fact that they continue to have all of these little problems is really getting frustrating, and it's hard to watch. I had to switch away from the Buffalo Calgary game for a while because the sound was fine. The video was very jittery. It looked like, actually, I think it was Bud Bailey was joking that it was really cold in Buffalo, so the cameraman was shivering, so the whole screen was shaking the whole time. Which was probably true. I know it was very cold in Buffalo. It was certainly cold here. It was in the minus 20s for most of the last week. But yeah, I had to switch away from the Buffalo game because it was just too jittery, and I don't know if that was my problem or if that was a problem on the feed. But I don't remember seeing anybody else talking about it. But yeah, it's certainly not awesome that however many years into this system, I guess it's only year 2, but we're still talking about it, and like at some point we have to be able to stop talking about it because they fixed the damn problems, but we're not there yet, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, this might be the second year with NLL TV or whatever, but this isn't the first year they've done streaming. We've had streaming as far back as B2, and you want to talk about some issues and some bad feeds. That was B2, but at the time that was our only option. So by now, I definitely agree. Some of these issues we should not still be complaining about 10 years later. There's definitely an issue when 10 years later, when technology has advanced to the point it has, speeds have advanced to the point they have, and yet we are still complaining of pretty much all the same issues. So while this might be the second year with this particular system, it's not the second year with them streaming. By now, they should have it figured out. So sorry to jump in there, Tyler.
No. I was doing chores today, and I was thinking back, like, this is a solved problem. But they had to make their own platform as opposed to piggyback on somebody else's for whatever reason. And the Buffalo feed did not look crisp. It's like, oh wow, that's like, is it the NLL TV problem? So I remember, oh, it's the game of the week. So I switched over to Twitter, and it basically looked about the same. It was just slightly grainy, not like Rochester grainy, but it wasn't crisp and pristine like I've seen out of Buffalo in the past. All right. So my next not awesome, I'll save the worst for last, is every roughneck forward not named Curtis Dixon. They are having a season that's not as bad as the Stealths, but it's not good. And Yeah, their game in Buffalo, 8 goals, 4 of which were Curtis Dixon's, I believe. So he had half the team's goals. Dan McRae, I think, had 1. Tyson Bell had 1, if I'm correct, which would be 2 defenders. So the forwards are down to possibly 2 goals out of everybody. It's bad. Dane Dobie had 1 for sure. That's bad stuff for a group of forwards. And I mean, I have a really bad set of forwards on the team I like this year as far as their production numbers. But it's bad enough I got to notice it and say, hey, Roughnecks, help out your teammate. Find an assistant that works for all of you, whatever you got to do. But they did not put up any good numbers, and it was bad enough that I noticed it and said something about it. All right, Melissa, back to your next not awesome.
So I think my not awesome is, it probably ties into something Graham has from what I saw earlier. The Swarm. They're not looking like the team that we're expecting this season. And I think the announcers really said it best. The Swarm just couldn't develop a rhythm.
Oh, did we
It was
lose Melissa?
very
Oh, no, she's back.
choppy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, did I drop out that whole time I was talking? Oh, dear. Okay. I even asked my husband to stop streaming, so we would hopefully have that. So I don't know if it dropped out or not. We'll just start over. My not awesome ties into, I think, what I saw in Graham's notes about the Swarm just not being the team that we are expecting this season, considering what they won last year. So I think the announcer said it best. The Swarm just really couldn't seem to develop a rhythm. They had some really good play, some good defense, some good goals, some good offense, but it was very haphazard, very choppy. It was just not cohesive. There was a lot of disjointedness. And we're still in the beginning of the season, so you expect a little bit of this, but they looked like first game, second game issues, not necessarily the 5th season. And so it's going to be interesting to see what continues with the Stealth. But they're not quite looking like the team that we saw last year. And it's not like they made a ton of changes, so it doesn't quite make sense either. But that is my not awesome, is that the Stealth really aren't playing up to their potential. What about you, Graham?
That was going to be my next one. Just the Swarm had in 2017 at all where they were shut out. They had 5 or 6 where they only scored 1 goal, but they weren't shut out in a single quarter the entire season. And first quarter this past weekend they were shut out. It's only 3-4 games in. They're just not looking like the same offense that we had last year. Last year they could just score at will. If they needed a goal, somebody go out and get 1, or 5 or 12. And yeah, for at least for the second half of the season, it was almost like, are they going to score more or less than 15? And it was kind of 50-50 as to whether they would do that. It's just not happening, and I'm sure adding Jesse King is not taking anything away from them. Maybe Jordan Hall meant more to them than we thought he did. I mean, King is obviously a great player, but this is, I guess, his second season in the league, whereas Jordan Hall's been around for 10 or 12 years or something. So could be they're missing Hall's veteran leadership. And I mean, it's a fairly young team, so maybe he meant more to them than we expected. And we all thought he was a very big part of that offense. So, so I guess that was going to be my next not awesome. So we'll go to Tyler for the next one.
All right, time to quit dodging the subject. But the Stealth, as a whole, from top to bottom, were not awesome. That said, as bad as things started, they didn't quit and had an okay fourth quarter. So I'm proud of them for doing that. But there's still a lot of gloom and doom. I was at the 2009 playoff debacle in Calgary when they were down 15-0 in the third. This actually felt worse. Like that game was like, wow, I can't believe they're not getting going. I can't believe they're down, but they were down 4 or 5 goals in the first quarter, maybe 9 or 10 at the half. They're down 10 or 12, 10 goals in the first quarter. It was so bad. Goalie saves were just non-existent. They were so non-existent that by the time Brody McDonald came in and made a save, the first two saves he made, because he had already let in goals, people were sarcastically cheering. And Jake Elliott did not like it. But honestly, I would have done the exact same thing because it was so atrocious to play on the floor. And it wasn't just the goalies. The very first goal, 3 yards off the crease, wide open-ish, or 3 yards off the crease and just in close and buried the shot. And I immediately thought, boy, I don't know if the Stealth even get a shot that close all game because they just shoot from the outside. Like they did like 2 minutes later and they missed it, but it was kind of sums things up. If you want to go against Stealth, you want to shoot from the inside, you'll get your chances. They have no goalie, as I said last week, and the Rock just, I don't know, you couldn't have proven that fact any more than they did. It was super sad. In the third period, Nick Rose made a save, and they said that's his 20th save. Or no, he didn't actually say it was 20 save, but like they said, all right, Stealth have 1 goal on 21 shots. So that means Nick Rose had 20 saves at that point. The Rock already had 20 goals at that point. So it was so bad that the Rock had more goals than the Stealth had shots on goal. I can see that happening in the first 5 minutes of the game, maybe even the first 10 minutes of a game if the team is starting hot. But 35, 40 minutes into the game, it was just bad. It was sad. It was grotesque. And I don't know what else to say. I don't know what I would do in their situation besides, you got to drop a bomb in there and fix things up to some extent. The league usually will do coordinated announcements throughout the week, but like in the NFL, coaches will fly home fired. Like they know it. I figure at this point they had some sort of meeting last night or tonight, and they're either fired or they're changing something. It's got to be massive. I don't know what you could easily do. I just want to stop talking about it because it's depressing. I'll go over to you, Melissa.
So I'm going to kind of keep beating the dead horse because I agree with a lot of what Tyler's already said. I remember watching my own team going through some of these things, and you couldn't put a finger on, okay, what's wrong? And we had head coaching changes, and we had goalie changes, and we had more coaching changes, and we had player changes, and nothing seemed to work. It's so hard as a fan to watch. I mean, Stealth aren't even my team, and it's so hard for me to watch. This was definitely one of those games that was so dominant by one team. It really wasn't even fun to watch. But while Tyler said there's definitely a lot of goalie issue, this is just an all-around issue. I mean, some of those shots that they shouldn't even have had the opportunity to take them. It's like everybody had the flu or something. The defense wasn't there, so it was all on the goalie, and the goalies seemed like they were half asleep because I remember there was at least a couple goals where the goalie didn't even twitch, and it's not like it was even a screen. The goalie just sat there. It's like, okay, what is going on? There definitely needs to be some changes. I don't know. I mean, Batley just came in towards the end of last season, so I don't know if they'll be changing that already. But the Stealth have been struggling, I feel like, for 4 years now. Tyler can probably correct me. Something big definitely needs to happen, and maybe it is just overhauling the team, because they may have just gotten to that point that you just can't patch this team. You just kind of have to start fresh, and I feel like that's what it finally took with the Mammoth. As I've said before, I'm shocked that the Mammoth are sitting at 3-0, and part of that is because I've been watching them kind of do this piecemeal patching for, I want to say 7 or 8 years now. The team has never been the same since after 2007, and when they made some big changes that maybe weren't necessary, and we've been struggling ever since. And then John Grant Jr. came in, and that just seemed like a different dynamic that didn't quite work. It was like putting a while a strong square peg, it just didn't quite fit with the rest of the triangles or something. So trying not to overbeat this horse, this stealth definitely were just not awesome, and that was from top to bottom. I definitely give him kudos for not giving up towards the end of the game and still trying to keep in it, even if it was only a little bit. I don't know what's going on with this team, because this has been one of my favorite teams to, that love-hate relationship that you get with a team, that you love them, but you hate them too, because they're your favorite opponent, but secretly you kind of like them because they got a lot of great players and they challenge your team. That's not the stealth. And I miss that stealth. So some changes definitely need to be made, because we all know there's way too much talent on this team for them to be playing like this. I mean, it was almost like a pro team was playing a high school team. It was just bad. So I think I'll step out of the box. Did you have anything to add, Graham, or move on?
I guess, yeah, I'd like to move on, but I do want to address this as well. I sort of made some jokes on Twitter about the stealth needing some goaltending help. And I said that the Bandits were going to trade Steve Dietrich to the stealth, which is a play on the fact that he traded for his own rights from the Rock a couple of years ago. But it actually just got a Twitter comment from somebody saying blaming this all on goaltending is ridiculous. And I'm certainly not blaming it all on goaltending. There were many shots there that should have been stopped, for no question. But the Rock also had 79 shots on net. And anytime you allow 79 shots on net, the best goalie in the world is going to let in a lot of goals. So the fact that there were that many shots shows that it's not strictly a goaltending problem. The defense was just allowing way too much. And so like you guys said, it was top to bottom a problem. So I guess if we want to move on to Melissa mentioned an extra topic of what did the stealth need, and maybe Tyler wants to just drop this whole thing and move right on to our predictions. But I imagine none of the three of us know, or me and Melissa don't know as much about it as you do, Tyler. So do we need to be trading guys like Reese Dutch and Corey Small? Do we need to just dump everybody and start over? What do you think?
Okay. I think the forwards that they have, the three are the best between Schuss, Dutch, and Small, even if Small and Dutch aren't producing points yet this year. They don't have the dirty inside person. Like I think I said last week, Jordan Durston being gone has actually been a massive hindrance to them. They need somebody like that on offense. I don't think there's much more than that to happen, and they can get all sorts of change happen because Small, Schuss, and Dutch all shoot from outside. And there's no threat inside, so players are stepping out to them, pressuring them far outside, so they take another step back to free their hands, and they're even further away. And a long shot, every goalie they've played so far is just, oh, thanks, I see that coming. Done. There's nothing going in. They need to have just perfect shots to get goals, and it's not working. Everywhere else, I think nobody should be safe. I think I would say Schuss, Dutch, and Small are the only untouchable people on the roster. I'd keep Beers for sure, and Salt. So 5 people who I would not touch once I start thinking about it. But I think they have a practice every week on like Tuesday. At this point, I tweeted it should be like open practice for goalies. Like any goalie in BC wants to show up and take shots, you should be considered getting an offer. There's no reason to should have any allegiance to anybody they have there. Defensively, I love Hawksby. I've known him since 2006, at least, maybe 2007. He was in San Jose, going back there. But I would say, like, as calming as he is and whatnot, like, speed-wise in this game, the stealth need to push the action, and he doesn't have speed. Suter is the same way. They're all so happy they signed Suter. Suter's not fast. I don't know like what he's really adding to help the team. But they don't have a mentality to get the ball out and push. They're not stepping out on people to prevent them from going where they want. The offenses playing against them control every aspect of the game. And either they're too slow or not strong enough, or for whatever reason, got to reverse that. So I think goalies, I take them or leave them. Defensively, pretty much everybody but Salt and Beers should be questionable. Travis Cornwall's been playing pretty well, pushing some action up. McFitridge had a nice goal, but I don't know. It's not enough. I think they would earn their spot back if they got pushed, but there are definitely some people on the bottom half of the roster who they just need to change it just to show that it's what's happening. You could change out some big name person and say, hey, you're gone. You're going to sit, or you're gone. We found a trade for you that made the whole team better. That would be a little bit shocking, but we're going to show that nobody's safe. Like the performance that's been put out this year is unacceptable. Arguably, the performance that's been put out for the last 4 years is unacceptable. And it's tough. One thing I haven't mentioned is GM Doug Locker. A lot of people up in BC are not fans of him because he's not a BC person. But I think when you step back and look at it, like, he's not a BC person, therefore he doesn't have allegiance going back to being a 7-year-old playing with these people or being part of, oh, he's from Burnaby, he's going to pick Burnaby people, or he's from Coquitlam, so he's going to pick Coquitlam people. Like, he can go to all the games and scout all the players a lot more objectively, and I think that's pretty valid. That said, he has to claim some responsibility for putting the roster together as well. So I don't know what to do other than blow it up with the bomb, but it's got to be somewhat tactical. And it's not a lost season yet. It's only 4 games. Anyways, 3 games. I don't even know at this point. It's just bad. But there's still plenty of time to right the ship. They only have to be better than Calgary. That's doable. They're not awesome themselves, but it's not going to be an easy couple weeks. I got to stop now. Melissa, what are your thoughts?
So I think with the South, like you said, they're not out of this yet. So we're definitely not writing them off because Calgary's struggling. But I think part of why this seems so much worse is, as I mentioned earlier, it's going back several seasons now. And for me, I think a big part of it is a lack of leadership on the floor or something. Because to me, and you could definitely correct me if I'm wrong on this, it seems like it kind of goes back to when they first lost to Zwicky. And that is, in my mind, that first mark of the team starting to struggle and just continuing down this path. So to me, it seems like there's just somebody that's not helping them gel, helping communication, helping keep them motivated, whatever it is they need. It just seems like, to me, that the leadership is a bigger role. And of course, losing the head coach, to cancer, things like that, that definitely doesn't help. So they had 2 big losses in a very short amount of time. And so everybody's still been adjusting, but and as much as I love Reese Dutch, he's definitely one of my favorite players. I mean, heck, I have 2 of his jerseys. So maybe he isn't the right person, and I kind of feel like maybe they've relied on him too much. Maybe he just needs that perfect counterpoint that he had when Zwicky was on the team. I don't know. But as we discussed earlier, it's definitely not just one thing. I mean, Belanger definitely struggles a little bit. I feel like he's like Cosmo, how when you get in his head, he tends to crumble a little bit. But Belanger's a good player. We've definitely seen him play very well, very much at the top of his game. And yet he's looking like a sieve right now. So he's definitely not stopping hardly anything. But as we said, it's also the defense. The defense is letting the other team get so close to the net. I mean, Adam Jones should not be at your crease consistently, and yet he was. There was no stopping him, and it didn't even seem like they were trying. So I definitely think at this point, maybe it is just an overhaul. That you almost look at it like you're part of the expansion draft too, and you're just gonna change everything. I think moving forward from this point, it's a bigger leadership issue. And either somebody on the team needs to step up. I know when the Mammoth went to the Cup, Brian Langtree was considered a huge part of that. Not because he was fantastic on the floor, which, yeah, he made some amazing goals, but he could also be a bit of a hothead and a loose cannon at times. But because he kept the team really motivated and really focused on that goal. And I just don't feel like the Stealth have that person to do that. So I think if they can get that really, really strong leader that some of the other teams have, we might see a change much quicker, and they don't need to overhaul the team. But it'll be interesting to see. What thoughts do you have, Graham?
Jake Elliott said it on the broadcast. I mean, as bad as the season has been for the Stealth so far, they're only a game back of Calgary, and there are lots of games left in the season. So, yeah, they lost by a whole bunch this past weekend, but the previous 3 games, I mean, they were all losses as well, but they didn't get completely destroyed. They didn't look great, but there were glimpses here and there of the team we saw at the end of last season. So, yeah, if they can put it all together and become the team that they were last year, then they can have some success. It's hard to point at one terrible game like that and say that's it, we're done. Let's start trading everybody. But at the same time, it's not 0-1, it's 0-4, and last year's single playoff game notwithstanding, it's been 4 years. So it may be time to start looking at bigger changes. I like you said, Tyler, I can't see somebody like Reese Dutch being traded, but it might be if the management of the Stealth thinks, okay, this is it, we need to start making significant changes, that may be something that they do to really let everybody know, look, this is not acceptable. And
I try to think that nobody needs him in the West I can think of, but it could be the kind of thing San Diego could pay a pretty price to get somebody. So that's not immediate, but and it sucks because like they're BC players playing for the BC team, but San Diego comes in and says, well, here's the #1 overall draft pick in the draft because we're the expansion team, and we get a dynamite forward to get started. It could be just Small or Dutch, or not, but nobody right now could pay that price. So maybe they're stuck with stuff this season, and they write it out and they do the best they can and try to beat Calgary and they get a playoff game. But if you already have Curtis Dixon, why do you trade for Reese Dutch? Mammoth don't necessarily have an elite scoring forward, but they have good forwards with Noble and Rue, people that can put the ball in the net, and McIntosh, Church, etc. for the rush. Like nobody in division has a need for it. I don't think anybody out east wants to fly in somebody. It's a tough situation to be in for the Stealth.
Yeah, I don't see anybody in the East trading for Dutch, like you said, trying to fly him in from. He doesn't even live in Vancouver. He's a Victoria guy, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So trying to fly him in every week would be expensive. Sorry, Melissa, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, as we said, we're trying not to say that the season's over, but at the same time, I could see this game being very demotivating to the team as a whole. Thankfully it's been a few years, but the Mammoth had where they were going scoreless at home, or not scoreless, winless at home. And it wasn't too bad, but then it was like 0-2 and then 0-6. And I think we got up to 0-8 before we finally got that monkey off our back. And you could see when they'd come out on the floor, they were trying to, we're going to do this time. But they just had this weight on their shoulders that you could just tell was really demotivating them, and it was really tough. And I definitely see this as being one of those. And as we said, they haven't had a really good, strong season for a few years now. And so this is just kind of the cap on that. I'm really hoping it's going to be that final thing that finally makes them go, oh, wait, okay, we're going to break out of this, and this is why, and this is how we're going to do it. And it's awesome. We're not behind, that far behind, and they turn the season around. I would personally love to see that. I know Tyler would be very happy to see that.
Yeah.
I just hope that they don't let this game become that just Atlas's world, essentially, where they're just holding this huge gorilla on their backs when they go into their next game. I think that's all I have.
All right, I think we've beaten that to death, and Tyler would be very happy if we just move on to something else. So let's go to our predictions from last week, and this is actually some good news. Tyler and Melissa both went 3-0, so that was nice. I went 2-1, missing the Buffalo Calgary game. So overall, we have a tie. All three of us are above 500. Look at that. So Tyler and I are tied at 9-7, and Melissa is way ahead at 11-5. It's actually not way ahead; it's 2 games ahead.
I was going to say 2 games isn't way ahead.
it still looks good. You're in double digits, and we're not, so it looks like a lot. So we got 5 games next weekend, and Melissa, we will start with you since you are still leading the way.
All right, so I get the tough job once again this week. The biggest game that gave me pause was Rochester actually has back-to-back games. They're playing Toronto the first time and then facing New England actually at home. And so, as we know, a lot of times the team wins both games. They might lose both games. They can split. And there's really no solid predictor of what's going to happen. I pick Rochester to beat Toronto, and I really don't have any good reason for that other than the fact Rochester's playing well. Toronto's playing very well, especially coming off their solid win this weekend. I don't know. It's just kind of be a gut feeling or flip the coin. I don't know how you want to put it, but I'm going to go with Rochester. New England at Rochester was tough as well. New England hasn't shown very strong. Rochester has shown that they're playing pretty good so far this season. But playing back-to-back games can be really hard. It fires up some teams. It makes other teams fall apart the second night. I'm going to go with New England on that one. But there and again, I could probably be swayed to switch that. Vancouver and Buffalo. Yeah, after this weekend, sorry, Tyler, I can't pick anybody. I'll pick every team that Vancouver's playing until they show otherwise. So we'll go with Buffalo. Although it would be nice to see them get fired up, maybe prove us all wrong. With the Rush and my home team, I'm going to go with the Rush. Colorado is looking good, and I definitely want to jump on that wagon and be like, rah, 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 this team's awesome. But there's still that skepticism in me, and, if every time I'm choosing them to lose, they win, I'm okay with that trade. So we'll choose them to lose and the Rush to win. Georgia at Calgary. This was another toughie. I just don't think Calgary is coming together yet. Georgia didn't play their fourth quarter very strong, but they did play pretty good the other 3 quarters. I'm going to pick them over Calgary. So what about you, Tyler?
All right. The Rochester at Toronto. I'm picking Rochester. I think it might be a little bit of a letdown game for Toronto after what they were able to do last week. They'll be happy to be at home. I just, as you were talking, realized there's a chance they might have somebody suspended because they had some fights and instigator calls, which could carry some issues. I can't remember all the rules and around mandatory suspensions that are possible because you start a fight on purpose. Then again, somebody who did that would appeal. Like by default, everybody just appeals. So that wouldn't be this week, but it'd be their next game. There might be so many of them that a couple people will just sit this week anyways to get it out of the way in case they all don't end up suspended the next week after the appeals go through. So I'm picking Rochester the first game. They've looked really good. Their only loss was that terrible travel day to Georgia. So they have a lot of potential. They have to then get on a bus and go home and host New England, and I'm still picking Rochester to win that. So I have them winning both games. They look sharp, and like I said, their only loss was when they had the worst travel experience I've heard about in a decade. Buffalo over Vancouver. I think we've covered that pretty well the last 40 minutes. The Rush going to Colorado. Yeah, the Rush are in the form of, hey, we're not going to lose a game. That said, Colorado looks really good, and they're at home. So that maybe they'll get a little advantage from being at home. I just remember the league kind of puts out what's the word I'm looking for? Odds on the games somewhere, but I can't find it right now. But occasionally,
that is the Twitter game of the week, and somebody's perfect record is going down this weekend.
Yes, so it'll be a very, very interesting game. I can't remember where they put the odds, but occasionally then I'll, like, somewhere on the homepage, they'll put out odds for the games, I want to see what it is for this game, but I thought about it too late. But I'm picking Mammoth to win, just because they're at home, so maybe they'll get a little bit something out of that. Finally, Georgia at Calgary. They're both 1-3. We're not expecting Georgia to be that bad, but they are. Calgary, they can be hot and cold. Even though I said all their forwards were just completely atrocious, they have moments. And there could be this moment at home trying to show that, yeah, we can do it. And Georgia has to travel, so it could be a little harder for them. So I'm going out on a limb. The one I'm least certain about is Calgary beating Georgia, but I put it down that Calgary will beat Georgia. Graham, go ahead.
All right, I will finish it off. We have Rochester and Toronto. This one was tough. I wanted to just immediately go with Toronto because they've won their last two games not by 20, but they've scored 20 in each of them. But the Nighthawks have also looked really good. And like you said, Tyler, the one loss was the day when they sat in planes and in the airport for basically 24 hours before arriving at the arena, 20 minutes before the whistle was blown. So you kind of can't blame them for that loss. But they're in Toronto, and the team has got to be super confident after the last couple of games, and they have the best player in the world in Tom Schreiber. So I'm going to go with the Rock. New England at Rochester. This one was also tough, but New England is playing okay so far, but Rochester has just been playing better. So I think, especially if they lose to Toronto the previous night, they're going to want to get back into the win column, and I think they're going to take out the Black Wolves. Vancouver, Buffalo. I'm with you guys. Going for Buffalo and probably going against Vancouver until, like Melissa said, until they prove otherwise. Saskatchewan at Colorado. This one I'm looking forward to watching. I'm going to go with the Rush on this one, just because I think the Mammoth have looked really good. The Rush have looked even better. I'd have to look at the numbers again, but the Rush just look like they are a powerhouse. And like I said last week, they were just angry at the fact that they didn't win the championship last year because they probably thought they should have. And they are not going to let that happen again. The Mammoth almost look like they're as surprised as Melissa is that they're doing so well. And I'm a big fan of Ryan Benesh. I think he's a great player, and I've been a fan of his for many years. So it's good to see him off to the hot start that he is, or that he has been. So sort of a point for the Mammoth there, but I still think the Rush will take it. So I'm going to go with the Rush. And Georgia at Calgary, yeah, like you said, Tyler, it's hard to believe both of these teams are 1-3. Georgia, I expect to break out and be at least close to the team we saw last year. Calgary, I have less confidence that they're going to do that, or at least not to the same extent. So I'm going to go with Georgia on this one. And I guess most of our picks are fairly similar, so hopefully all three of us will still end up over 500 next week. But yeah, we'll see what happens next weekend. So I'm looking forward to a couple of these games. So unless you guys want to talk about Vancouver some more, I think that's it for this episode. And Tyler is shaking his head going, "No,
Make it stop."
Yeah, I think we'll give Tyler a break. We didn't beat quite the dead horse when it was the mammoth, so we'll let it go for a little while.
And I remember a game with the Rock and the Bandits back in 2009. This is the one where Stainhouse scored 4 goals and added 13 assists to set an all record, and the Bandits won that one 25-10. And that was a really painful game to watch. And to this day, I think people will talk about that game, and Rock fans are like, "It never happened. I don't want to even think about it. It's just make it go away." So we will do that now. So the Rock and Stealth game just never happened. All right, so that will do it for another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.